Yeah, I know that last video was way long. But then again, this is a recap of what this course is about, so grant me some slack. Anyway, the first part is that a company focuses on is how do you create value? And the way we create value is through either evolving technology, understanding our customer better, and putting together the structure and processes that allow us to respond rapidly and quickly. And so we'll talk about technology evolution. Technology evolution follows an S-curve. And so here's an example of microprocessor performance. And as you can see, it's been going up consistently for year after year. But even as early as 2005, what happens? It's starting to top out. And what's happening is that there are limits to how fast silicon can go. However, why has it kept going? And it's because they've worked on architecture. So you still have maximum 3.6 gigahertz processors for a reasonable price in your PCs and in your laptops. However, the reason why we get higher performance is number of cores. So we had the quad core. As we can see, it's not linear the way it improves. However, one thing is people think, oh, well, R&D is about, we have to wait for scientific achievement and things like that to happen. Nah, the thing is R&D progress, it's not about inventions. It's about investment. How much are you willing to push the field? And that's that you look at solar cells. I mean, solar cells all of a sudden went from 17% efficiency up to 45% efficiency. And in 1960, 50 years earlier, it was at 14%. So over 50 years, it went up 4%, and then all of a sudden it's now tripled. And it's because, well, how much are you willing to invest in it? However, technology has its limits, and like in transportation, first there was the horse, and the horse could only go so fast, and so we went to the car, and the implications of now you're using fossil fuels and combustion, and airships, nice and clean, but it still wasn't enough for us. So we went to the jet engine, and then the Concorde. Why did they stop the supersonic jets? Because it was ripping up the ozone layer. And now we're trying to go to space. So technology evolves. But technology always hits a wall. There's always eventual limitation, and that's when you have an opportunity to disrupt. We've talked about this in a different lecture of how your early adopters are much different than the early majority. Again, think about college students and like your parents, how different they are. One thing that's interesting, I think, is if you want to look at, for some reason, computer skills, I think, are highly correlated to age. And that's that younger kids just know computers better than older people, and it's because of what they grow up to. It's very difficult to predict S-curves, and it's because so many different things can change, whether it's your business model, your competitors, manufacturing, market shift. For example, before it was about building hardware. Now it's all about services. There's a phenomena called tipping and network effects, and that's that people, when it comes to platforms, tend to pick one over the other. And also technology change. The Digital Equipment Corporation was once the second biggest computer company in the world. They chose not to go into PCs, and it killed the company. An example of technology S-curves are the watch. When the watch first came out, they only had an accuracy to like 15 minutes, but people still wanted it because it was a reference of time. But then what you develop are standards, and now everybody has something that they all know they need to work to. And so Sapphire was used to do timing. And then the watch business started to flatten out. But then it took off again. It got disrupted by the electric watch. What enabled the And then the electric watch got replaced by the digital watch, and those, red LED watches, and that reinvigorated the business again. And then the business went through another reinvigoration. And that's that a company realized that a small Swiss company realized that watches were more than just timepieces, that they're also a piece of fashion. And they said, how do we make low-cost, fashionable watches that people are going to want and have variety? Well, they implemented plastics into it, and that's how Swatch got started. And that reinvigorated the business. Now it's flattened out again. And now the question is, will the smartwatch reinvigorate the watch once again? An example of an S-curve right now is actually ebooks. Ebook shares have dropped, have pretty much flattened out between 30 and 35%. Now, what caused the initial takeoff and growth of it? It was the Kindle. The Kindle is what sparked it up, because now you finally had a good reader for books. The question is does anybody really expect ebooks to stay at 30 to 35%? No. We expect it's going to take off again. The question is, what is the disruption that's going to make ebooks take off? It's going to be video books or whatever. So how do I cross that chasm? What are the keys to crossing? And that's that they may not even know what your product is. So, meaning your cult knows what it is, but your customers may not. So you need to build up awareness. You need to take away all the risk elements. That's what Amazon did. For example, one of the big risks in early .com buying, e-commerce, was, can I return it? How am I going to return it? So they said, take 30 days. And oh yeah, by the way, you don't have to pay for postage. And so price, naturally we're sensitive about that. Who are my customers? I have to stop thinking about my early adopters and think about how the mainstream is going to respond. And also influencers are a very big issue. Say you're a startup company. Elon Musk posts on Twitter, I just tried your product. I absolutely love it. I recommend it to everyone. Next thing you know, 1 million people are going to run out and download your app. And so we're affected by certain influencers. And when we're uncertain about a product and all, what do? We ask somebody, hey, have anybody tried this? What did you think of it? And so influencers give you credibility. Some examples of companies that have crossed the chasm. The calculator and VCR, what did they do? They just dropped the price. It was just priced too high. Once they mainstream price, it was fine. GPSs, when they first came out, you heard all these horror stories about people like driving their cars into lakes and things like that. So what they did is more people used it. It reduced the perception of risk. 3G wireless was released in 2002, but didn't take off until 2007. And that's that the smartphones really weren't all that good. And not only that, but there were more apps. Anytime you have a platform, you need content. And word processing requires education. And so they put it on all computers. So the next part of value creation is your customer, how their needs evolve. And so the thing to look at from the viewpoint of the customer is, what is this technology you're introducing? Now, innovation means that nobody's ever seen this before in this particular field. For example, everybody's seen a barcode, but in the biomedical business, nobody had seen a barcode on a drug bag before. That's innovative. Disruption means that your new technology or your new business displaces the incumbent approach. And invention means it's a unique approach that nobody's ever seen before. And so it's novel, whether it's a semiconductor or the car or whatever. And so that's what those three types of change, what they actually mean. So, is it innovative or disruptive? Well, Uber, for example, is it really disruptive? Well, it's changed, the way people can work. They can get a part-time job and all. But does it really change the world? I mean, people still take taxis. There's still multiple transportations. You haven't seen people drastically go out of business yet. So you can make the argument that Uber is probably more innovation than disruption. Craft beer, on the other hand, is chewing away and replacing the way they did beers before the big brewing companies like Miller or Budweiser. They've lost half their market share to these craft beers, and it's shrinking rapidly. And so they're trying to figure out where their future is. And I'll leave it to you to decide whether the remaining companies are innovative or disruptive. What is the truth about my customers? And that's that there's one of two ways, and this is actually when people are looking for their calling, you can look at it one of two ways. One approach is people are stable, and that's the thinking that I need to go out and find who I am. It's in there. I just need to bring it out and know what it is, to uncover the truth about us. The other side is that people change. We change over time. We change over age. When you get older, it's like, oh yeah, I'm a much different person than I was 30 years ago. And so one could use the argument, if it's just bringing out what's inside of us, that's what Apple counts on, that you're going to be consistent. And so they're going to consistently find what it is inside you. On the other hand, Sears didn't change. The way customers were changing their preferences, and subsequently they're going under. And so that's where when students come to me saying, what do I do? How do I find my future? And I tell them, it's like, do you believe, you are who you are, and now I just need to figure out who that you are is? Or do you believe that your life is a journey, that you're going to change over time, your preferences are going to change, so enjoy the ride? What's the correlation between your product performance and sales? Disruptive technology typically starts out as being the cheap option. That's disrupted things through cost. And then over time, that technology starts displacing everything, even to the highest end. And also, what happens is in new markets, the demand is much different than old markets, because old markets want scale. In the new markets and new products can't offer that. And so what ends up happening is you start off in niches. That's where you get your start, and then you hit the curve and you grow. And then you hit the mainstream market entry, and so your value integrates to that. And your market starts to run away. The innovator's dilemma is that you have innovators and incumbents. And so the question is, when you innovate, what is it that I should do? Because a lot of innovation means replacing and cannibalizing the business that you know. And so innovators are about agility. Incumbents are about locking you in with the regular customer. Innovators are limited. They can't service multiple customers, and that's the big advantage of incumbents. They have scale. This is why IBM breaking itself up to go up against all these little competitors doesn't make any sense. Look, you offer something they can't, and that's scale. Play to your advantages. Innovators are flexible. Incumbents aren't. Incumbents are designed for incremental improvements, not big leaps and bounds. That's the advantage of the innovators. The thing about gambling is that innovators are willing to gambling. And so, how do incumbents survive? They got cash. They can just wait. They can, compartmentalize things like, okay, we need a new division to go deal with this. But they have to be careful, because if they don't respond to it in time, then the vertical curve kicks in, and then they're taking off, and they're going so fast, you're never going to catch them. In terms of risk, how do I mitigate risk? And I do it through intelligence building up through social media, and also through my partnerships. So, who leads? Do you lead the customer, or does the customer lead you? The thing about having your customer lead you is their preferences can change. And so you have to be able to move with them. In terms of scale, are you making incremental changes? Are you a Me Too company? Do you just keep doing what you traditionally do? That's what Intel has done. Or are you the innovation company? And that means you have to be careful, though. You have to protect your cash. Or are you the kind of company who defines yourself through competition, that you believe all marketing is just hand-to-hand combat, and that's all you're going to focus on, what competitors are doing? And so typically large companies tend to be Me Too. Companies that define themselves by competition typically are going to miss the larger picture and the larger opportunities, and you have to do it to a certain degree. You always have to do hand-to-hand combat. But the question is, how much? So in the next section, we'll talk about structure and processes.